Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this page. Again, this is me, Rizan Hamid, the founder of the Arab American Occupational Therapy Group. And thank you for joining our group and supporting this community. And today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing and speaking to Dr. Gillian Rai. She goes by Gigi. And I'm so excited to highlight this absolutely different experience a little bit than what we know, but again, because this group is a place for everyone who is interested in Arab heritage, I am so excited to talk to Gillian about her perspective of Arab heritage and how she's connected to that. So welcome to this, Gillian.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So Gillian goes by Gigi, so if I call her Gigi, that is why. Gigi, first, thank you for giving us the time to talk a little bit about your experiences and what you know about the Arab culture. Gigi identifies as South African. She is connected to the Arab heritage in a different way. She's not directly descended from Arab heritage, but she will tell us a little bit more about that. She also have a very interesting private practice under the name of Sublime Living, which promotes health and wellness, also for OT, but she has very a clever way of running this business to promote health and wellness that is client-centered, that's not necessarily be promoted as OT just because, health and wellness is the core of OT and we don't usually, or we don't necessarily have to call it OT. So she has very interesting way of running that business, which speaks to her innovative and smart business mentality. So I'm really excited to talk about that too. So Gigi, to start, again, can you tell us a little bit about your heritage, the heritage that you identify with, and how do you know, or what is your connection about Arab heritage in general?
Well, thank you so much, Razan, for that introduction. And it's an absolute pleasure to share myself and my experiences with everybody. So I'm South African. I was born in Durban, South Africa, and I come from a very large family. Both grandmothers had 10 children each, who had many, many children. And so very big village there. And so part of my aunties married into married Muslim men. And so they converted to Islam. And so my cousins, I have many cousins who are Muslim and who are very who follow the religion and the culture. And so by that I grew up, celebrating Eid and even fasting because I was so curious. I wanted to try it out. When I witnessed Ramadan, and so my aunts would always they invite us for iftar, and so it was really all of the traditions were very close, and I incorporated all of them. I also went to a university for non-white individuals because at the time I went to university for my bachelor's in OT. South Africa was a segregated country, was during apartheid. So my university was for non-white people, and it was largely Hindu and Muslim, and then African people. And of course, at the time during apartheid, people like myself who had mixed heritage were called colored people because we had multiple heritages, and they had no other better name for us.
Yeah.
So also during my years at university and in my bachelor's of OT, I also have many friends as well who were of Arab heritage. And so I incorporated a lot and experienced a lot. My husband is Lebanese, so he is Arab. And so my extended family, my sister-in-law as well, friends, we travel a lot to the Middle East, lived in Saudi Arabia. And so we have extended family, friends in Lebanon. So in a nutshell, that is my closeness for Arab heritage and culture.
Yeah, in a nutshell, like you were surrounded by Arab individuals and Arab cultures and communities, and that is
Yeah,
fascinating because
yeah,
people from Lebanon may have also again different experiences than those who you grew up with. You said you're going to the Middle East. You lived in Saudi Arabia, so these are like such an eclectic
yeah.
experience with the Arab community, which makes it fascinating. Takes me to my next question. What is, out of all of these sub communities that you grew up with and you interacted with, your husband is Lebanese too. What stands out to you in the Arab heritage or the Arab community as an OT? So you observing things as an OT, we always have that OT lens when it comes to doing and experiencing and daily activities and culture. What stands out to you from all of these eclectic experiences?
Yeah, that's so true. We can't get away from that lens or that framework by which we see the world. So my mind is always on in that OT world, and there's so many things. So that's hard in one sense because to kind of pinpoint a single thing or I remember when I first lived in Saudi, because as you said, people who live in Saudi have some differences than people who live in Lebanon or in Abu Dhabi or in Durban, South Africa. And so while I had so much experience and I learned so much, but I was noticing the differences. And so with my OT lens, I was thinking, wow, we don't think about when we're in the US in particular, if we're working with a client, we're not thinking about, there's this client who prays 5 times a day.
Mm.
And if they're in a wheelchair, how do they get down on the floor? And so I was going, wow, why are we teaching this in OT
Yeah.
school? Why are we giving this to our students in the US? And of course, I've taught at many universities, so
Mm.
I've been a professor for a long, long time, and I love teaching. And so that was my first, light bulb. Of course, coming from South Africa, I always was thinking about this in my teaching because I had a South African and an African lens, and go tell my students stories about, you can't teach somebody how to get on a porcelain toilet if they have a hole in the ground, because that's been my experience. And now I was going, somebody needs to pray 5 times a day.
Yeah.
How did they get down on the floor on the prayer mat? And how did they wash? Because you need to wash before you pray.
Yep.
So these, subtle but not subtle,
Yeah.
critical things in
Right.
somebody's life. Even not eating with the left hand, making sure your hands are washed. And then of course music. I love art, I love music. And when I saw like different musical instruments, if somebody were coming to OT, and they were a musician, it's not a guitar, it's not a drum, it's not a, but also the type of music,
Yeah.
which I love. I love love Arabic music, and then of course food, uh,
Hmm.
different dishes, different types of dishes.
Yeah.
Some people they eat halal,
Yeah.
they don't eat, and so that's very important.
Right.
Also the women have different roles in Arab culture, and in different Arab cultures, women's roles are different as well. And I also experienced the people's perceptions of disability. I had this, I'm very open and everybody met, and it was just, wow, there's a lot of shame in some there was,
Mm.
hiding or misunderstanding or, so those were all really interesting. So it was just an observation, it was
Yeah.
experience, there was no judgment, it was just like, wow, all the things that I didn't think of in my practice, in my teaching,
Yeah.
that are critical as an occupational therapist, but as a human being,
Yeah.
living
Absolutely.
living in this world.
I am so glad we recorded this because the examples you gave are excellent. I couldn't really ask for better answers when it comes to the perspective on the Arab culture from a non-directly related Arab OT, because you give such excellent examples on culture humility when it comes to treating clients with disability or even well elderly or well adults or well children, when it comes to what they do on a daily basis, and it's highly influenced by culture. So you give brilliant examples of the things that you should be looking at, and the more you know about a culture, the more you reflect and see we don't know enough and we don't have enough to even know or like
Exactly.
interact with these clients. So thank you so much for that answer.
Of course. And I think I'm also a person that approaches everything with curiosity, you know, and
Yeah.
asking questions and just observing and just being curious.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is infused in OT. We have the OTPF and we talk about all the intricate levels of occupation and doing. And you mentioned food, you mentioned eating, you mentioned music. So that touches on like, ADLs, IADLs, the ablution, which is the washing before the prayers that you said, it's called ablution. And it looks like it's subtle washing body parts. It's such more intricate than that, it has sequencing. You need to remember the sequence of the move. You need to
right.
remember the number of the washing. So this is such a good skilled observation as an
Yeah.
OT.
Well, I also learned, I had to learn the times of the prayers because because I needed to know when to go to the grocery store or to the shops. And so
Right.
this became important to my daily routine
Yes.
was downloading the app, learning
Right.
the times of the day where the shops would be closed.
Yes.
Um,
And Gigi is referring to, I think, your time being in Saudi Arabia, because I lived in Saudi Arabia too. And I remember, so in Saudi Arabia, by law, shops and businesses have to close for the prayers time, and everyone has to go to the mosque or home or do, because and this is all religious based. And I'm just using this as a teaching moment. So you basically are required by law to go and do the prayers. And so you're right, as an OT, you have to pay attention to the times, not only dealing with your clients, but also for yourself as an individual. It requires memory, and planning. So people plan their daily activities around prayers time, whether for themselves to pray or to attend to their IEDLs of shopping and running errands and stuff like that. So this is such a good example as well, Gigi. Um, Before I move further into this, I'm very curious about what you're wearing. You are such an artist, and you said you're an artist. So can you tell us a tiny bit about what you're wearing right now?
Sure. Of course, I love black and white, so I was attracted by that, but also the writing, and it's what we would call it's not exactly an abaya, but it's an abaya-ish because it's open in the front, so it's more like a kaftan.
Yeah,
And we could talk about abayas if you want. I have a few in my closet, which I love. I
yeah,
think they're so beautiful and elegant.
yes, yes,
Now that I'm not living in Saudi, I wear them with jeans and
yes,
t-shirts and a whole new fashion trend. But this one I got when I was in Lebanon, and I don't know what the writing means. I think it's just all the alphabets, because usually I have some other things that have like welcome,
Mhm.
and this sort of thing. But I think this is all because I asked the lady, and it's all the alphabets in Arabic. And I love it because, when I wear it, it reminds me of Lebanon. It reminds me of my
Yeah,
time there.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's just so, and I love interesting and different quotes. People always say, where did you get that from? And I'm like, well, I didn't get it here. I didn't get it here.
yeah, yeah,
So even my clothes tell a story of my influences, and even a bag. I have different bags from Africa or
yeah,
all of my travels. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's gorgeous. And it's absolutely beautiful. I'll give you a trick why these are not words, these are just the alphabets. And so you're right, because the alphabet in Arabic, words have to be connected. You can see that each alphabet stands alone, so that means it's just letters spread around, and that's still so
Good.
gorgeous. But
Well, thank you, because I thought, oh gosh, I think it's just alphabet.
it's just alphabet. It's just alphabet. But again, the Arabic language is known for the beauty of the graphics,
Yeah,
the writing. So
I do. I love the graphics.
yeah, and I want to go back to the abaya that you were saying. Abaya in Arabic, which means it's a clothing that is kind of the national dress code for women, at least a while back. I know things are changing culturally speaking in Saudi Arabia, so I can't speak to the present time and how the national attire look like for women, but back in the days when I lived in Saudi Arabia, the black, beautiful silk-like abaya, which means it's a long dress that is, plain, but it looked so elegant. You're right. And there were some designs that are absolutely gorgeous and
Oh my
so very
gosh.
expensive too.
Yes. Not cheap, yes, but
Not cheap,
beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful.
So this is another cultural artifact for you listening to this video to learn about from the Saudi culture. So you answered a lot of my questions, Gigi, and you give much more than I really was hoping for.
Good,
Knowing about
good.
your experiences and knowing about your culture. So I also want to highlight the business that you have. You said you have a business that you run, and you shared with me before we started recording such an interesting way of promoting this and how you do this. And what stood out to me is that the core principle of being client centered. And the 360. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, the thing about it, when I conceived of the idea of sublime living, it was, it's definitely OT centered, but as we said earlier, many people don't understand what occupational therapy is or what OT is, but we are driven by our clients at the center of everything we do.
Mhm.
Our clients drive our questions, the way we think, the way we engage with the world. It's really one of those professions that is ego less.
Yeah.
It really is ego less, because if we move with ego, we are going to miss the client. And so that's what I love about it, is that it really compels us to drop your ego, drop your pride at the door. And I think for my practice, I thought, wow, I want to really bring this home, this client-centeredness, rather than using this word occupational therapy, OT, and confusing people, or bringing about some misunderstandings. But client-centered, everybody gets it, and everybody gets, what does it mean to feel the sensation of sublime? What does it mean to
Mm,
feel sublime? We all know that feeling when we have it, and we know it
yeah.
when we don't.
Yeah.
And so part of my approach is it's 360 degrees, because there's so many things that could take away from feeling that sublime or add to it. And so really getting at, what is it that makes you feel this way? Or what is it that could make you feel this way in your day? And
Yeah.
then, that um, drives me to be curious and ask questions about, how do you start your day, or
Mm,
what is it that excites you, what makes you happy, what drives you, and so on. And it could be a child, a teenager, it could be an adult. And so one of my first questions is always, what is it that what does it take to make you live a sublime life? What is
nice.
that thing? And that's where we start.
Yes.
We start to get underneath what's in the way of
Right.
living that life, right? And as we know, as OTs, that could be so many things.
Right.
So it's never just this one thing, or two things, but you never know where it's going to lead you, depending on that person in front of you. And I think every time we're with somebody, we learn so much about ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And
We
you're right.
learn.
This is definitely the core of OT. I mean, we pin everything that we do to the meaning of occupation and meaningful and purposeful living. So this screams OT all over what you're saying, but you had such an innovative and smart way of promoting it as sublime living. It's not just one thing. It's not just what you are. It's what makes sense and makes meaning for living to you. So I think this is so brilliant, and it should definitely, maybe we should consider
Exactly.
promoting OT that way, because that sounds so much more appealing and interesting than some of the terminology that we use to promote our own
Yeah,
profession.
I
So
think, sometimes that could be a whole nother conversation, Razan, but it sometimes I go, wow, why are we confusing people?
yeah,
I know it's difficult because we offer so much, we bring
right,
so much. We're in this amazing position to be in people's lives, you know?
yeah.
Um,
And
so how can we make this easier?
yeah. And you mentioned something to me before we started this, is it's different in South Africa. You said we don't have that issue of,
Mhm.
telling what OT is. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that.
And so this always fascinated me because I came from South Africa where everybody really, I mean, I'm not even exaggerating, gets it, understands it. I don't even need to use the full word occupational therapy. I can say OT. And every time I go home for a visit, I'm still astounded that if I say I'm an OT and then, oh, my cousin's an OT, my aunt, my niece, wow, it's unbelievable. And I don't know. So I often just sit with that and I ponder it and I go, what is it that it's so easy to understand here?
Mm,
And what is it that makes it so difficult in the US?
yeah.
And
Although I think it's safe to say that there is more OTs in the US than in South Africa,
yeah.
and the longevity of the profession in terms of, like, how old the profession has been, I think it may be safe to say that it has been longer in the US
So yeah, and
than
even
South Africa.
looking at it from that perspective in terms of numbers and the differences in numbers, and I still haven't come up with the answer. If anybody's wondering why we still struggle here to
Yeah,
understand, what OTs do and what we are about, and why it's so easy in other countries. And it's not only South Africa, because in Australia, in other people just go, wow, that's amazing. I love OTs, or I love what you guys do, or
yeah.
I was working with one, or so I don't know what it is. So
I
I'm
think
still
this
I'm
is
still trying to understand so I can do things different, or maybe have a role in promoting and shifting our understanding.
yeah. Or
Uh,
the way we talk about OT, you're right. So I think this is definitely a big question for another episode
yes.
that we can talk about. So I'll come back to you for this, and maybe we can run a different conversation. I want to go back to the intersectionality of Arab identity and you as an OT, you being surrounded and growing up and interacting on a daily basis with people who identify with Arab heritage. And you spoke beautifully about what stood out in terms of culture and how the culture affects and shapes and actually sometimes dictate what you do on a daily life routine, and even when you do that. Um, on the other side of this, is there any, like, not so great aspects that you witnessed or observed about the Arab culture that may specifically affect OTs who identify as Arab? So if you were to identify as an Arab OT, from your observation, because you have very good observation skills, if you were an Arab OT, how would the Arab identity affect your work as an OT in a negative way in
hmm.
the US? Such a long question. I'm sorry.
Loaded question. um, wow. I mean, I think there's so much in that question, because I think it depend, if I as an OT am surrounded or working in a practice where people are not curious, or people are, if it is more toxic, or people are not really being observant or having you fit in, or not respecting what you might need to do in the day, or what you might need to observe. I mean, it would be unhealthy. It would
Yeah.
be toxic. And so I think, it could make it really difficult. And I
Mm,
think that, in my experience and opinion, there's not many places where people either get it or want to get it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a difference in wanting to get it
Yeah.
and thinking you have it. And I would say that is more the norm than the exception. When you walk into environments, the minute you walk in, whether people already are going to perceive you based on their stories. And imagine as an OT, if I walk in the building and I'm covered on my hair, or I wear black every day, or that is going to, the minute I walk through that door, I don't care where I go or where I'm working, that is going to trigger people's perceptions based on their own stories and their own experiences. And sadly, it is the norm rather than the exception. Now, you asked about the negative, so we're focusing on the negative. And I think that the media doesn't help. The media is so powerful, particularly here in the US, and instead of using it for good, they don't always use it for good, because I think it has such a powerful role to play in portraying people of Arab heritage in a positive light, and that could change people's stories and perceptions and all of the above. But instead, it encourages it. And so, people have all kinds of, I think, people get scared. People are afraid, they're anxious, they're of all this, the unknowns and how they've perceived people of Arab heritage. And I think on another one is also interacting with a client. I might interact with a client who doesn't want to be treated by me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's absolutely
right. Because there's also less OTs who are not just of Arab heritage, but who are brown and Black. So most likely I'm going to interface with a client who doesn't look like me, right? And so they might not want to have me as a therapist, or they might reject me and say, I don't want to work with you, or maybe in more subtle ways, just not do well with me. And that can be really hard because it's about you. This is personal. It's who you are. It's where I come from. I can't change that. I can't change my face. I can't change, what I'm wearing. And so I think as a profession, we not only need to prepare us as practitioners, but our students who are coming up and how they're going to engage with clients and with the world in general. But we really got to think about how to prepare students and prepare us as well. I think we focus on our clients, which is important, but I don't know, we need to start thinking about how we can do better with advocating, supporting for our students out there in the field, as well as the practitioners, because a lot of these things to other people are so subtle. They're not visible. They're only to you because you're experiencing this rejection. You're experiencing the world in this way. And even sometimes my best friend doesn't get it because that's not her experience. And what are you talking about? I didn't see that. Or so it's and it takes energy. This takes energy from you, from doing your best work, from bringing your best self, because we only have so much bandwidth. And this is bandwidth tax. So how can you be your best self when you're constantly using energy to survive, to protect yourself? And I go, wow, imagine if we didn't have to worry about all of these things, the things we could accomplish, the things we could do. One of my favorite books is The Sum of Us, by Heather McGhee. And she literally calculates the cost of not having spaces where everybody has access, has resources, has opportunities. It's so costly.
Again, I'm so glad this is recorded because I couldn't ask for a better answer. Oh my goodness. I asked you a loaded question and you equivalently gave me such a rich answer that you touched on so many things that each one of them we need an hour to talk about. You talked about lived
Yes, absolutely.
You talk about lived experiences. You beautifully describe that lived experiences with, the way I walk into a clinic, what I'm wearing, what I look like. You talked about the Brown experience. You talked about bias and stereotyping. And he talked about the ugly aspects of, like, people not wanting to know more, or not identifying, even those who I empathize and advocate for, they still don't have the same lived experience. So more empathy is needed, and it's music to my ears as an academician that we need to work more with our students. And I do have great faith in the new generation of students, because I think they've seen a lot
Yes.
over the past 10 years. Those who are, like, coming into the pipeline to OT, they've seen so much that they do have that common sense and intuition to what makes sense and what doesn't. So bias and stereotypes don't make sense. They're hurtful. They're damaging to the community. We could do more. We could do better. And that's why you see a lot of advocacy in the OT community. We have COTAD, we have Diverse OT, we have
Yes.
all kind of student-led organization that speaks and calls for action when it comes to cultural humility and cultural humbleness.
Yeah,
So this is,
absolutely. I'm so inspired by the younger generation and the younger OTs, the younger students. I really am. And when I'm with them, I'm like, wow,
yeah,
they're like, we are not gonna stand for this. We're gonna do something about it.
yes.
And it really is inspiring to see that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, this is another topic for another conversation. So I'll be reaching out to you a lot. So I want to go back to one more thing, and then I promise I'll end this. You mentioned the ugliness of the norms these days, and unfortunately, it is. There's so much bias and discrimination against the marginalized communities and people who don't look like other people. And you spoke about, I like the word ugliness, and it is ugly. And you mentioned before we started recording another ugly experience that you had to go through growing up and going into undergrad, the segregated universities. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I see so much similarity when it comes to being marginalized and being discriminated against and being put in a box that you belong here based on 1, 2, 3, and this is your experience and this is how it should look like. And I found that profound. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I grew up during apartheid South Africa, and so I'm a child of oppression, very familiar with it, and grew up going through separate doors in hospitals, separate doors in schools, playgrounds, beaches, swimming pools, you name it, public bathrooms, the whole list. And so I was always confronted by a closed door.
Yeah.
And of course, maybe the upside of it, I learned that it can open.
Yeah.
To just because the door closed doesn't mean you can't get through it, and you can't get on the other side, or you can't break that door down open if necessary by very gentle means.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in a, gosh, I don't even know how to describe it, terror and trauma, very toxic community, because at the time many people who owned land in South Africa, and I'm just giving you a little bit about the history,
Yeah.
were moved to kind of what would be similar to a reservation in the US. So these communities were created for people of color, and their land was taken away. They were moved. And of course, this is not, your ocean facing property.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, this was located, of course, with oil refineries and, toxic air and the worst. I mean, this was awful. And so people were hungry. People were, there was violence. This is what happens when you create these kind of things and don't give people access to resources and opportunities like anybody else. It's set up, people are set up for a vicious cycle of all kinds of socioeconomic issues. And so, yes, I want to go to OT school, and that's a whole nother story of why I chose the profession.
Yes.
But I had a, personal experience. And of course, I went to the hospital where I had to go through the separate door because I was wanting to observe an OT. And it also happened to be the hospital where I was born. And at the time known as the colored section of the hospital. So I saw an OT working and I was so inspired, and I was like, this is it. And then I looked up universities and they were also segregated. And so I didn't also have much choice. I mean, I wanted to be a marine biologist, but that was never going to happen because the only school that offered it was not in my area, and it was for whites only.
Wow.
So during that time, that was just, my dad was go swim in the ocean. That's as close as you're gonna get. So it was difficult. It was really difficult,
Yeah.
and even getting in, I didn't think I would get in because it was the only OT program in my neighborhood. So I thought, wow, what's my chances? There's only 15 people who get in here. But long story short, I did get in. But once I got in, I mean, all my professors were white.
Yeah.
So that was another layer of difficulty. It was, and when you grew up in a country oppressed by white people, I was a very nervous, anxious student as an OT student because I felt like these people they had power over me. I witnessed and experienced that they had power over my life before I was even born. They had power over me as a child, over my parents, my neighborhood, my community. And then I'm in school, in OT school, and I wouldn't even raise my hand. I would sit there and be terrified that even if I might know the answer, I'm not going to say anything because what if it's wrong? I'm going to get into trouble. You just went down this, talk about imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Right.
It's
Right.
mild. This is a mild, that would be mild, but this is how it impacted me. I was scared. I was scared to get in trouble. I was scared that they would, punish me. I was scared, but this was my lived experience. And my whole, 4 years in OT school, I had to really learn how to navigate. I remember sitting in we would have like 4 hours of crafts, arts and crafts, because we were learning macrame and sewing and all of these things. And I remember getting some of those things so wrong, like the stitches were not, but I would not ask. I would ask a friend or like really help me. But I remember leaving at the end of the day going, oh my God, am I going to pass?
Oh.
Am I going to pause because there are things that are not clear, that I don't understand? How do I navigate this? And then, going to field work. I did end up repeating one of my field works because I was put in a place that no student should ever have been placed at. And there was a language barrier.
Right.
So, for 8 weeks, I was terrified level 2 student. And so I didn't make it. I had to repeat it. There was no way I was going to pass that. Going into that institution with so much fear.
Yeah.
And a place that no student should have ever been placed. And I remember mustering up the courage to ask my professor, can you put me somewhere else? I'm really not comfortable here, and I'm not doing. And she just was like, suck it up.
Unfortunately, that's a lot of what students hear these days when it comes to expressing themselves or expressing any discomfort that they have for whatever reason in field work. And again, Gigi, this is such a great answer because it's a sad lived experience, and I'm sorry that you have to use your story to educate and shed light on the topic. But this is such an important lived experience that a lot of students nowadays, even if it was in South Africa, in the US, they can relate to this experience, whether it's that mental cost that you talked about earlier, that it consumes you being in a classroom thinking about the things that you're going through. Am I right? Should I ask questions? Will I get in trouble? What will people say? Will people judge me, misjudge me? So all of these internal battles that no one sees, you're experiencing. And again, I'm sorry that you had to share this experience, but I think it is important, and it took courage of you to actually share it. So I'm very grateful.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm so grateful to share that. And I think that, and I always say in a positive way, and on the upside, it's always been how I've moved around in the world. I cannot, it's like being an OT, but I cannot be in spaces and not um observe discrimination. I cannot be in a space and see somebody and not witness or notice, I should say. I'm not able to turn it off. I have to
Wow.
really make a conscious effort to not notice. So anywhere I go, this is at my heart, to remove barriers, to observe how people are, not treated nicely, and how can I make a difference there? How can I shift this? And I think, from a student perspective, I relate, as you said so beautifully, when I'm with I get it, what they
Yeah,
might be going through. And so I'm always thinking about, how can we give them voice?
yeah,
How can we give
yeah,
them, safe and brave
yeah,
spaces?
yeah.
Um,
And I selfishly want to take, the lesson learned from this experience and bring it back to the students who identify with Arab heritage or any other marginalized community is, and you said something very nice. You said it taught you that if a door closes, that it also can open. Although you're describing a whole gate, it's not just a door. So we're talking way bigger than a door. We're talking about racism and oppression, which
yeah.
we definitely need like hours and hours to talk about. But you beautifully said, as a child of oppression, and I took away from that is that it gave you resilience and the means of maneuvering and like navigating this. And this speaks to my philosophy too. I do believe in these gentle means when it comes to fixing the problem. I'm a big supporter of communication as way of overcoming these barriers and overcoming these closed doors.
Yes.
It's not by us attacking each other. It's not by, social media wars. It's really by communicating and finding these gentle but effective means of fixing the problem. And I do believe that. And so it's music to my ears, everything you said.
Exactly. Good.
I just want to close this because again, I could talk for hours about this, but because I want to be mindful of your time,
I know, me too. I'm being very disciplined here
you're
of
amazing.
time and everybody else's time.
Definitely I'll come back for more. But I want to close by saying, last piece of advice for the supporters like yourself in this group, in the Arab American Occupational Therapy group or other. We do
Mhm.
have other groups that support
Yes.
other marginalized communities. We have all the subgroups within the MDI network with AOTA. We have the Black OT caucus. We have the Asian OT group. We have so many other groups that are fighting the same fight that we are fighting. Continue record. So again, I was saying exactly there's a lot of other communities. What is your message to them continuing this fight and this advocacy?
So you're asking from a minority marginalized perspective.
Yes.
Um, you know, I'm thinking about what has kept me healthy,
Yeah.
what has kept me sane in some of the most challenging moments. And I mean, it's not easy. I will say that there's some moments, experiences where it takes all of you, right?
Right.
Um, and I'm sure many people listening to this will relate that we in general work so hard to remain composed, to remain respected, to remain respectful, but it's not easy work.
No.
And I think so the first part of that answer to me is about,
Go ahead. Yeah. Taking care of yourself.
yeah, so for me this self-love, taking care of you, self-care is really critical,
Mhm.
because when you are challenged, when you're in those tough moments, this is where this is really going to be important. How do you remain calm when you're triggered?
Yeah. That's such.
How exactly, sorry, how do you compose, how do you make calm when we're triggered, when we're mad, angry, frustrated? How do we get underneath what is triggering us, right? like you said, not moving with aggression or violence. But so I just go self-love, self-care. This is where we have, this to me is a big message, is figure out what it is to take care of yourself, to love you, all of you.
Yeah, yeah.
And what do you do to get at that, to love you, and to take care of you, so that you have this very firm, solid base from which to come from, right? So that your base is really solid, and
Yeah.
it's coming from a place of love. And that's one of the things I say, we don't have all the answers. We can be curious, we can ask a ton of questions, but at the end of the day, we have to check our hearts.
Yep.
No matter who you are, if you check your heart and you come from that place, and you come from a place of love and kindness, even sometimes in the face of adversity. That's why I say this is not easy for the faint-hearted.
No, it's not. And I think go ahead.
So that's where the self-care and self-love is so important, and to take breaks and to change your environment sometimes, step away from it,
Yeah.
and do the things you love doing that help you to live a sublime life.
Right. Sublime living. Exactly. I think this is such a good advice, self-care and self-love, and I think it applies to both those who are advocating and fighting for their advocacy, and also the supporters as well. Empathy and loving, and listening to your heart is really the way to go.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like, it's like a dreamy or like
Yeah,
rose-tinted glasses. That's not the message I want to convey, that, I'm out there, focusing on self-love or self-care, and I don't have this appreciation for how difficult and challenging the world can be.
yeah,
I think that if you focus on that on a daily basis, and that's my personal experience, it's draining.
yeah,
Its bandwidth tax is an all-time high.
yeah,
And again, to help others, we have to start with, I would say charity begins at home,
yeah,
to start with yourself. Even though sometimes you feel selfish or guilty, or it's so important, while acknowledging all ugliness or difficulties that you're faced with, whether it's a client or your family or yourself.
yeah.
Um,
Well, this is such a good advice. Thank you so much, Gigi. And
of
again, we
course.
will be talking a lot more about this too. And burnout and exhaustion and advocacy fatigue, it's a real thing, as you said. And I'm sure we can share a lot of, practical strategies, as you said. It's not a pie in the sky. It can happen, and it will happen with those who want to advocate more. I want to
Exactly.
end by saying thank you so much for this. This is such a wonderful experience and conversation with you, and I will definitely come back for more to talk more about all of your experiences. So thank you so much for joining us,
Well,
Gigi.
thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching, listening, tuning in, and yeah, we can schedule many tea times.
Yes, we will. We will. So again, I'll talk to you later then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.